Starts with a P. Pleaser. If you missed last night, we do have the handouts there, and it's also recorded online. So the pleaser goes and, coped as a young person by trying to make people happy and ends up doing that in life. And, people can have mild versions of it, moderate, severe. And the issue is not whether you have certain traits, but is it become a problem in your life? And you may not feel it's a problem, but someone close to you may feel it's a problem. So you need to be open to the possibility that even though you're an avoider or vacillator and it doesn't feel like a problem to you, it may be creating a problem for those around you. So we covered the pleaser this morning. Wife covered the avoider. Normally she hasn't traveled with me because our kids were younger and had to help them with school and stuff, but now she's starting to travel with me, and so she'll be, over time doing more presentations. And we got a couple gifts we'll do after this presentation, and we'll do combinations after that. So we covered avoider, vacillator. Vacillator is the one that seeks connection, craves connection, becomes very disappointed when they don't get it, and it triggers pain from the past. And we covered the pleaser last night. And so we're going to look at the controller and victim. The controller and victim come from the same type of setting, where there's abuse and neglect. And when we talk about abuse, we're talking about capital abuse, capital neglect. As human beings, we're pretty resilient. We can bounce back and adapt if something happens to us once here, there, a few times, whatever. But when it's repetitious, it makes a definite mark on us. And trauma, can also make a mark on us. We can have a pretty good home environment and attunement, but then, we end up being, assaulted, raped, or other things can interfere and disrupt our attachment as well as other things. So in the chaotic home, the child's needs are disregarded or they're simply overwhelming to the parent. And the child's expression causes outrage or withdrawal in the parent. Outrage would be, very intense reaction. Withdrawal would be just pulling away, abandonment. And so you have in this home the parental response to the child's needs of abuse or neglect of the child. And instead of relieving the child's stress as God created it to be, a parent or both parents become the source of the child's strength or stress. I'm just going to grab water here. Discovered yesterday that pollen is high here, and I could feel it as we were driving into Florida. It was like, welcome to Florida. So the parents become the source of stress. And if the children can't go to their parents for stress relief because the parents are the source of stress, then what do? And so the child becomes confused, and fear, anger, and anxiety can be instilled in them. And there's two different responses that come out of this type of environment, primarily two. One, the strong-willed child begins to dominate others to reduce the anxiety. They learn to control their environment. The weaker, softer child is going to become a victim and yields fully to their environment in order to keep peace. So again, chaotic, confusion, aggression, that could be physical, sexual, verbal abuse. Often there's neglect, violence, could be drugs and sex and all kinds of stuff going on in this setting, in this home. And so the child grows to detach from their pain for survival. Now, avoiders do that to a certain extent, but not nearly what this environment creates and causes. And so triggers, we said that experiences from the past can be tapped and flood into the present. So the things that will trigger a controller are criticism, challenge of their power or authority, and vulnerable feelings. Why do you think vulnerable feelings would trigger a controlling person? Any guesses? It makes them feel vulnerable. It taps into that pain that they've pushed down and suppressed and fight against. And was never comforted. And so it creates some inner instability. And they don't want to deal with those emotions. And so then they end up reacting to vulnerable feelings and things like that. Children crying and needing this and things like that can stir up and kind of begin to get them in touch with that past. And they don't want to go anywhere near that. And so anger is going to be their response to cope. Victims get triggered by others' anger because that was unsafe for them. And so there's coping. The controller uses the emotions and actions of rage, intimidation, bullying, emotional manipulation, violence. The victim can dissociate. Dissociate probably has a wider meaning than this, but essentially you're there, but you're not there. You've kind of disconnected from where, the here and the now, whether it's, radical dissociation where you're just out of it completely, or you're just kind of there physically, but your mind goes somewhere else. And so they learn to take the abuse, try harder, blame themselves, and sometimes they can turn on their children and abuse their children in reaction to the triggers that have been touched in their life. So dominant feelings for the victim are fear, depression, hopelessness, powerlessness. They believe they're bad, flawed, defective, unlovable. And the controller, dominant feelings can be anger and rage. And they want to squelch those vulnerable feelings that cause them to feel weak. In relationship lies, the controller thrives on adrenaline, and chaos is normal. If things are calm for both of these, they begin to feel anxious. Why do you think they would feel anxious and calm? Because usually when it was calm, a storm was coming at home. And so they're just waiting for the shoe to drop and something to go erupt. We said the one will control, one will become passive. And in this situation, substances are frequently used to numb pain. There's a book written by a physician called Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate. I read it for part of my mental health chaplain training, where it's interesting, some people will become addicted to pain medicines and others won't. And I have patients that are dying who need pain medicine, but they're afraid of getting addicted to it. Well, Mate says that the studies show that the people who get addicted primarily, of course there could be some exceptions, are those who have had deep pain and the medicine makes them feel peaceful for maybe the first time in their life. And so they want more of that. So the medicine is stabilizing their emotions. Of course, it creates problems long term because you can't keep up with this, and a medicine that helps over time can become less effective, and you need more of it, and getting it and creates its own set of problems. So substances are often there to numb the pain from the experiences of life growing up. Are you with me this morning? Well, no, afternoon. Afternoon. So the victim just wants to survive. They want to get by. They don't really have many aspirations in life, and that's a generality. They feel unworthy, unlovable, believe that he or she cannot survive on one's own, and the controller is either I'm going to control or be controlled. It's my way, I'm right. Victim fears pain of abandonment and living alone more than the familiarity of abuse and control. So we wonder, why would someone stay in a situation like that? Well, sometimes, of course, we all want to try to save a marriage or something like that, and so there's a need to try to preserve, to protect, to, persevere. A pleaser often will stay too long because they think they can help the person. No, the pleaser. The victim will stay too long because being in a painful relationship is better than the pain of being alone.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what you just said, so does that mean that the pleaser at some point becomes the victim?
No. I was contrasting the two. Because sometimes pleasers will stay too long in an unhealthy relationship, but they think they can help the person. Whereas the victim stays in a relationship too long because the notion, the idea of having to be alone is worse than being in an unhealthy environment, an abusive environment. Because abuse is familiar to them. Yes?
Well, we get cut off of that. Also ask, sometimes victims may feel like the controller is creating an unsafe environment for them to even leave. Like, they can feel unsafe to even try to leave.
Yes, that can happen too, absolutely. And that could happen to anybody that finds himself in an abusive relationship. Fear of what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to me, and so forth. But even for those among the victims who have the opportunity to get out, they have a clear path, that unknown and being alone is a big, scary thing. And so, not to say they can't, but it takes a lot to get a victim to the point where they can find their way out. And some do, for sure. And this is not my specialty, so I don't want to speak too much to the details and nuances of it. And so controllers have a hard time keeping jobs. Why do you think that would be? They got a temper. They need to be right. Controllers have very short tempers, very short fuses. And they have a natural struggle with authority figures. And they can be helpful and charming, and controllers aren't all bad, but many times, it might be to suit their own desires. And that we're talking again about extreme controllers, not necessarily mild or moderate. Both of these tend to forget or minimize the traumatic events in their past. They've blocked it out. And so if they're telling a story, a controller, the person might smirk or smile when they're talking about an awful experience because they're disconnected from it emotionally. They've forgotten what it was like to be young and vulnerable and be in that situation. And so controllers need compassion, and they need firm boundaries. Can you think of any Bible characters that might have developed a controlling way of life? Huh? Saul? Yeah, King Saul. Who else? Nebuchadnezzar, fly off the handle, take people's lives and so forth. Pharaoh in Egypt. Those would probably, we don't know all the details of their lives, but I used to say, babies don't come out of the womb mean. And they don't grow up thinking, man, when I grow up, I want to be addicted to drugs, I want to abuse people, and I want to have a miserable life. That's just not, we're conditioned by our environment influences. And it's interesting, God went head to head with Saul, he went head to head with Pharaoh, and they wouldn't surrender. Many times the kings of Israel did evil, and they would not respond to the prophets. But you do have some that did respond. Nebuchadnezzar responded over time. And I believe God put Daniel in Nebuchadnezzar's life with the intent to save Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Daniel worked with Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't take Nebuchadnezzar's abuse, in the sense of he stood up when he had to stand up, but he'd also say, may this interpretation be about your enemies and not you. So Daniel had a caring for Nebuchadnezzar, but he also had boundaries. I'm not going to eat this, or I'm not going to bow down, or whatever. He wasn't obnoxious about it. And so controllers have good parts about them. We don't want to demonize them. Unfortunately, some refuse to listen to anybody or change because they can't stand the vulnerability. So we said they become the source of danger for their parents. They bring fright without a solution, and fight and flight are normal for them, and they demand compliance from their children. And they demand respect as a response to their disrespect. So they can be disrespectful, but they expect their children and partners to be respectful to them. And often we think of men as controllers, but I've known some female controllers as well. And they expect obedience to irrational demands, which are usually not age appropriate. You can't expect from a 3-year-old what you can expect from a 10-year-old, what you can expect from a 15-year-old, and so on and so forth. So children's neediness can trigger memories that have been suppressed and repressed by the controller. They can't bear crying and arguing and feelings of helplessness, which then result in physical and verbal abuse. They can be underprotective of their children by neglect, but they can also become overprotective and rigid and intolerant of mistakes and so forth. Children come to anticipate a storm from the controller when things are calm, and they're often physically and emotionally absent due to addictions, whether it's sexual, chemical, work, or otherwise. I think there was a time in our church when we had controlling leaders who thought they were kings. That's kind of before my time, but I've heard of stories where, situations where conference presidents in the old days would say, you're going here, you're going there, so it's not outside of religious circles. In fact, religious circles at times have more appeal to controlling people than non-religious circles. And we'll talk about that in a second. Oh, it's up here. Controllers, because they didn't have structure and so forth, can be drawn to it in the rules and laws of Christianity. They can even have experiences with God, and they can vigorously defend and enforce those things and believe in them. But then you have an interesting phenomenon where you find out that they're preaching one thing, but they're living a totally different thing. And you wonder, how is that? How could that be? And so somewhere in their mind, they believe that they operate under a different set of rules than others, and that some rules apply to others, but not to them. And, think of the number of pastors in the public eye who have been passionate about preaching about morality and this and that and whatever, and, very hard line on some things. And then you find out they had a history that you couldn't imagine. One of my favorite apologists was Ravi Zacharias. And when I found out he had all this other stuff going on, it was hard to believe. But, I started one day, I think it was the Spirit, I don't know. One day I was listening to him, and I enjoyed, he was eloquent and insightful. One day I thought, you know what, there's something wrong here. He's always on the winning side of a debate when he tells a story. And that doesn't usually happen in life. You don't always win your verbal debates and battles and so forth. And so that began to make me wonder, but nothing like what ended up coming out in the news. And he's just symbolic of, I don't know, who was it, Robert Jeffress, who recently got arrested? And, there's a lot of authoritarianism in evangelical Christianity. And we've kind of tracked along that, although I don't see that as much. Although I do talk to my friends from other cultures. And one friend told me, I know you could tell where a Hispanic pastor comes from because they tend to reflect their government. So if their government was heavy-handed and authoritarian, that'll tend to be their leadership style and so forth and so on. So there's pockets of it. I've talked to people who've worked in self-supporting work, which can be a very good thing, but there's been a history of authoritarianism around a personality or person, and who dictates how everything's supposed to be. So there's still some of that can exist. Let's see. With God, they're expecting to call the shots with or in place of God, but they're not closed off to God, can have a good heart in some areas of life. The victim struggles with depression and hopelessness. They tend to attract controllers, respond to abuse by trying to be better, no matter how unreasonable the demands are. They're skilled at keeping up appearances so others do not know what's happening at home. And we talked about the tendency to remain in abusive relationships. They don't expect a lot from God. They can't envision unconditional love. And so they focus on surviving day to day. The notion of seeking and knocking and the door be open to you is a tall order for the victim imprint. And for both of these, there's difficulty with long-term planning because they learn to get through the day, survival. And so planning long-term can be challenging. As a parent, a victim will tend to have trouble knowing who they are, what they think, particularly when being dominated. They can feel overwhelmed when unable to console babies and check out or dissociate, can panic and become abusive at times. At high risk for abandoning a child who is then left afraid, alone, and unprotected. And can be prone to be preoccupied with addictions to soothe the pain, dependent on a compliant child or children to take over responsibilities at the home, and can be dominated by a strong-willed child and tend toward depression, anxiousness, isolation, and can have explosive, unpredictable moods. This quote says, when one grows up in a chaotic home, survival depends upon distorting reality, minimizing the insanity, and becoming used to living in intolerable circumstances. Children have no other choice, so the skill of denial is well developed by the time they reach adulthood. And that skill helps to explain why abuse is tolerated, excused, and rationalized, and why it continues. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but we've talked about continuing to grow in relationship with God, spending time in His Word. Out of all the attachment injuries, healthy growth groups are important. You know, you have groups like Celebrate Recovery. If addiction's involved, Celebrate Recovery does that, and other things, AA and so forth, where there's support, caring, accountability. There are some good men's ministries that have emerged that are able to be an extra layer of support and accountability and care. Many times a therapist is needed because the issues of brokenness are so severe that counseling and medication very well may need to be interested, because the brain has been so wired with chaos and dysfunction and so forth that the chemicals and the way things work may require medical intervention to help a person get to a point where they can make the steps to where they need to go. And that's between them and a medical provider and so forth. But we don't want to rule out medicine in certain situations because of the damage that's been created over time. Getting in a safe environment for victims is going to be important. And again, developing self-awareness, grieving the past, and getting angry at it, reclaiming that awareness of childhood and what's happening, because they can become so disconnected. Now, do we always have to dig up our past? No. But if our past is sabotaging our present, we may need to go back and face some of those things and make peace with them and get comfort today for what happened in the past. Going to skip through some of this. Some of this is duplicate information. Recognize your anger has much more to do with childhood hurts than it does to the day-to-day events. And Any questions on that? Or on any of the topics we've covered so far? How many think you might have an idea of where you fall in these areas? Okay, a few. It took me a while. It takes some time to develop awareness and then begin to take some different steps toward it. Amado, this video, could you just touch and see if a name comes up on it? I have two that are back to back. One is, you want to see a vacillator extended listening, or do you want to see a controller vacillator combination extended listening? Who wants to see the controller vacillator combination? Who would like to see just the plain vacillator? What's that? We wouldn't have time for both of them. We did talk about, let's do not this one, Amado, the next one, the other one. It'll be controller, vacillator. Not this one. Okay. This is at a church. These are people who are wanting to do the right thing. They volunteered to come forward to listen. So this is a practicing extended listening. They're coaching the couple on how to listen to each other.
Welcome back. We have our brave volunteers. Some of you know Farron and Rebecca, because I guess they go to this church. And if I lived here, I would go to this church. You get to bring your coffee into the sanctuary, and I mean, it's just so hospitable, don't you think?
Amen.
Okay, so each of the couples that we interviewed, we asked one question to, and that's pretty much all I know. I said I would guess their style, so they didn't tell me what they were. But the question is, what bugs you the most about your spouse? And so we're gonna take that as the opening question. It's a little tricky to start with this one at home. We'll give you some other suggestions.
Don't start.
But we start with this one here just to try and help you see the value of extended listening. So I think I'm gonna make you the listener first, and so you start, and sometimes I'll say, ask him this, and even though I've said the words, I want you to say it, even though I've already said it. Okay, so ask him, so Farron, what bugs you the most about me?
So, Farron, what bugs you the most about me?
The fact that you don't set boundaries and that you can't say no.
How do you mean? Can you give me an example?
But you tend to allow your clients to manipulate your schedule instead of valuing the time for us at home.
So I hear you saying that I choose my career over family.
I don't know that you choose it, but it seems like we get what's left.
Okay, now let me just stop him for 1 second. She said back what she heard, and he corrected it. That's the value of saying back what you heard, because it's not exactly that. It's just, I just feel like maybe you don't have a choice, but that we get the leftovers. Okay, you're doing a great job. Okay, see if you can find out more.
How can I change that or make you feel that my clients don't come before you and the kids?
Hey, set your schedule and don't always make exceptions, because they'll work their life around your schedule if they want to come and see you.
Okay, now we went a little bit to problem solving there. What can I do to fix this? So let's go in another direction and let's ask him about feelings. And I've got your word list here, so there's your, can't have a conversation without it. Okay, so ask him when this happens, how it makes him feel.
When I don't choose you first, how does it make you feel?
Sometimes alone, maybe sad, because I come home and you're not there, and I wait sometimes for an hour or so, and I maybe fix dinner, you're not there. By the time you get there, we've already eaten or whatever, and so. Gets detached sometimes.
He's looking at a feelings word list.
Sometimes if you say you're going to be at a certain time and you're not, it makes me feel less kind of like you knew it was going to take longer, but you were trying to appease. It's not really a feeling, I guess.
Can you all hear him?
Not hearing what he's saying.
Can you hear it? Okay, just checking.
I guess
So when I
sometimes
miss dinner with you and the kids, that makes you feel alone?
uneasy.
Can you explain why?
Start to, I just don't feel important.
So when I'm at work, I'm trying to better myself and have a career. and because I want you to be proud of me. And so it's hard for me to say no because I want you to be proud of me for the business that I've built. Does that make sense?
Okay, did you see her go out of the listener role? It's okay. It's really easy to do. It's way easier for them to see it than for you to see it. Okay, she's trying to explain now why, why she has this dilemma and that ultimately her motives are good, which I'm sure they really are. But it's like the focus, I want you to just completely focus on your goal as being the listener is to get into Farron's body and to see everything through his eyes, through his feelings as much as possible. Okay, so say back some of the feelings you heard.
I heard you say that you feel lonely, and I don't remember anything else. Abandoned?
Okay, thank you so much. This is the harder role right here. He gave her a lot of feelings, probably 4 or 5, but she can only remember 1 because so often in the conversation, we're building our defense to talk them out of why they feel like they're feeling instead of going further into the feeling. So just review, give her the top 3.
I don't remember what they were.
Look again, they're still there.
Alone, that's one. I think I said unimportant.
Unimportant?
Okay, now we're going to back this up in time. So I want you to ask him if when he was a child, he experienced those same kinds of feelings.
Farron, when you were a child, did you experience those same kind of feelings?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about those memories?
I don't remember a lot of times when I couldn't think of a comforting moment yesterday. Can't think of times when I really felt the love of my parents. They divorced when we were, when I was young, and when they were together, it was violent and ugly most of the time. And so so I always felt alone there because I didn't.
So when I work a lot and I'm not home for you, do you feel like that we might end up that way? Like your parents?
I don't know if it's that or it's just the feeling of being alone. Because you're not there.
So ask him what he did when his parents fought.
What did you do when your parents were fighting?
I tried to stay out of the way. I hid. I'd usually go to my room and just hide and hope that it didn't spill into my room, whatever the tirade was about. Tried to stay out of the way.
Ask him if it did ever spill into his room.
Did it ever involve you? Did they ever come in your room when you were hiding?
I don't remember them coming into my room, but I remember my mom taking me and my brothers out and getting in a vehicle and trying to leave, and my dad stopping her. I recall that they both had guns that night. I probably never shared that with you.
Wow. Okay, what do you see right now?
You must have been scared, and I don't ever want you to feel alone.
Okay, do you see, what's the feeling you see in his eyes?
A sad little boy.
Okay, just tell him what you see. I see.
A sad, scared little boy.
And when you see that, touch. Whenever you see a feeling, reach out and touch. You know, whether you just touch a knee or you take a hand somewhere, put your hand on that other person and tell them, I see you. I can't imagine being a little kid, so validate his alone feelings. And
I'm
his fear.
sorry you had to go through that when you were that small. I can't imagine how scared you were. I'm sorry you weren't comforted like you should have been.
Can you see how I feel alone? Talk about that feeling with him.
I never want you to feel like you're alone.
Well, that's going to be impossible because it's an old feeling for him. It's like he's going to feel like that a lot. And it's like, so the goal is not for him to not feel it. The goal is for him to tell you when he feels it so that you can offer comfort to him. Because there's a lot of uncomforted memories back there, aren't there?
Yeah.
Okay, so so now tie the present. No wonder when I'm not home, I can see why you would feel. A validating statement is just a statement that affirms, oh, well, no wonder. It's making sense of their feelings and understanding why they have them. So can you do that?
I can totally see where you could feel unimportant and alone and the second pick in our marriage. And I'm sorry.
Okay, and Rebecca, I really appreciate your apology because I can tell, you really feel it. But it's like if you apologize too quickly or it's offering empathy. But it's like sometimes it's kind of like a signal, okay, that's the end of the conversation. I'm sorry, so now we're done. Or I'm sorry you had to go through that, now we're done. So if you're going to say you're sorry, just say, I really want to understand and hear more about this part of your life. So just tell him that.
I really want to understand you more and understand more about this part of your life.
Well, most of it I don't think too much about. So it's, sometimes I don't understand why I react the way I do, but obviously what I'm learning is that it's from things that I just choose to ignore.
Is there anything else?
That's a great question.
Probably on a time schedule. So. I guess my question is, should we stay on the topic of what the original question was, or do we go, because...
You have a lot of memories, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and just say the thing that's on your mind.
I don't ever remember anybody ever, when my parents got divorced, my dad sat us down and tried to explain it to us. The whole time my mom was in the background screaming at him. What I remember about that is he wasn't doing it to make us feel better. He was doing it to torture her. And it just made me not want to, I don't want to deal with, what I saw from him was he didn't want to deal with what was really going on. So he pushed it off on her. And so I see me doing a lot of those type things. So sometimes it's not you, it's that I don't deal well with me.
Wow. How vulnerable was that? Okay, so say back what you heard.
Because of what you experienced as a child, that has kind of bled into our marriage, and you want me to know that it's not about me sometimes, it's just about you. Is that right?
It's about the things that I refuse to look at. Yeah. I don't want to be vulnerable, even to you.
How can I help you with that?
Good question.
Just, I think asking the questions. That we make time and space to do that. Because the more you ask, the more I remember.
I can see that this makes you sad, talking about this.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more.
Do you see how intent his eye gaze is right now? He's really looking in your eyes to see if he can believe you. Aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. When you see really intent eye gaze, a lot of times in these speaker listeners, it goes to that place where there's just this intense gaze, and it's like a real look into someone's soul. Do you really want to know? There's a lot of pain down there.
It's true.
But you know what? You won't know your husband, and he really won't know himself until you tie those memories to his current reactivity. Does that make sense? Because he's saying he doesn't know why he always does the things he does. Right? So what was he inviting you to do right there? Say it back in your own words. So what you want from me is?
What you want from me is to make time so we can sit and talk about the things that happened in your childhood so I can better understand you. We have to have that important time, the quiet time and the alone time, just you and me, one-on-one.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And I think that it just takes it takes a lot to get, because, I mean, I haven't thought about some of this stuff in a really long time.
Thank you for sharing it, trusting me with it.
It's a great thing to say. Okay, so are you comfortable praying out loud? Okay, would you take his hands and pray for him?
Dear Lord, I just pray and lift my husband Farron up to you right now. He had a rough childhood, Father, and you were there with him all along. Will you just comfort him and let him know that I'm here for him and I can help him. I'm his wife. I love him. Let him not protect or hold it in or push it down or just try to stuff it. Just let him know he can talk to me at any time. And Lord, make me aware that I need to carve out that time and I need to make him the priority of my life. I just thank you for this time, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Rebecca. You did a great job. How did Rebecca do?
We're going to pause there. We're going to
And
pause.
how do you feel about the level of vulnerability that this man was willing to do?
Pastor Amado, we want to pause there. Okay. Give me some feedback on what you observed. I want to preface it by saying I wish Kay and Mylene were in my town and I could have gone and talked to them and they could help me through, and they are developing a network of coaches and therapists. I'm not sure where they have them now, and they do some training, but they've produced materials, which would be the next best thing, to help people to do some self-growth. Our partner is not our therapist. They can't be our therapist. But if our partner can learn extended listening, and we can go from conflict about this, whereas the issues are really deeper, and get down to this stuff and get some comfort in there, then this stuff can dissolve and not be as much of an issue. But what are some feedback, thoughts, reflections on what you saw?
I was going to share that when in our dynamic, when we were, really kind of in the middle of this stressful time, just going back and knowing where the reactions that, seeing that child, you remember you were saying you would be in your neighborhood riding around just because mom was always kind of gone, and he'd be just riding around looking for some place to land. And so it began, I guess, for me to feel that empathy. And I think you also saw that in me.
Empathy for your situation.
For me as an avoider and some of the things that I had battled with. So it does help when you're able to connect at that level. Even that is enough to diffuse some of the, infighting and tension that you feel.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay. Do we have a microphone over here?
Thank you. Because I was involved in a potluck, and so, setting up, I missed a lot of your presentation. But I'm interested to know, as far, when you were learning this process, how did it impact you? You mentioned that you're a person with ADHD. And
I don't have the H part, unfortunately. I wish I had more hyper energy, but I don't have that.
and ADHD, that's just the umbrella.
And I wasn't diagnosed until adulthood.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't show up as your typical ADHD child. I think over time our understanding of ADD, ADHD has grown. And like Daniel Amen's, he's got like his 7 types of ADHD and so forth. And so, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And just understanding, when you were going through this process, because when I went through the questions, because I'm considered an avoidant. But then as I continued, I realized that I may be somewhat pleaser and avoidant, which is quite interesting. So when you realize this process, both you and your wife, how was the process for you in recognizing, wow, this is really impacting me? And just becoming aware of yourself. And as far as mental health is concerned, and I'm coming from a mental health standpoint, we tend to, especially in churches, which is why I'm really glad that you're bringing this presentation, we tend to spiritualize these topics all the time. Mental health doesn't really exist. It's always the devil and, spiritual warfare and this and that and the other. Not that, spiritual warfare couldn't be a part of it, but just like you mentioned in the sermon this morning, okay, there's the devil and his entity, but then there is us too. And we shouldn't necessarily always blame the devil for the things that we can make better choices.
Yeah.
So as your specific type, would you please share?
Vacillator.
Vacillator. And your wife is an avoidance.
Yes.
Wow.
Very, very common combination. Very common.
Okay, and you're a vacillator based on your background and your history
Yes.
when you were growing up.
Yeah.
And then you also had a TBI,
Yes. And a mild one. Yes.
a mild one.
Traumatic brain injury. So there was a period of time, thankfully my wife is an avoider and is able to go about business and not get too stirred up and so forth to keep the house stable. But I slept for hours. I was depressed. I couldn't remember. I'd be at church and I'd want to call someone's name, and I knew their name, but I couldn't think of it. And so there was. This was 20 years ago, so it's been a journey, of repair and recovery, over time. Thankfully, with patience on part of my wife and church members and others, I was able to. I had a flexible schedule, and I had a job that allowed me to be able to rest, get extra rest when I need it and so forth, that others may not have that opportunity. And, churches have committees and things, so I didn't have to run everything. And so it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey, and I look back now and I feel like God is now using it as a ministry, because now I understand when people have injuries and they can't function to the capacity that they'd like, and can offer compassion and empathy and encouragement and so forth. But specifically pertaining to the attachment injury, when I learned and I started seeing stuff in the reading, I'd see stuff and I thought, I don't do that or whatever. And then I feel like God would send me these little memories and things. It's like, I lost my outlet. My outlet would be frustration and demands and so forth. And when I started taking responsibility for it, I hadn't built alternative responses. I had to start digging new paths. And it was a tough time. It was a tough place to, not be able to turn to the old ways, but to create new paths. Of course, having friends and others I could talk with was helpful. And journaling was very important to me. They say writing is the best, but for me, my handwriting's awful. I can't even read it after a month. I don't know what I wrote, but I could type it. And so I've got all kinds of journaling of just thoughts, feelings, frustrations, disappointments, gratitude, and all that. And so you're creating. It's like, a lot of skills. You're consciously, consciously incompetent, meaning you don't know, and then you start to get a little better at it and so forth, and then over time it just becomes easier and more natural to you. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It's all helpful, and I appreciate your story and the fact that as a pastor, chaplain, you're open with your story. You don't pretend to be perfect. Because I come from the generation of pastors. They have it all together, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm a little bit of a misfit.
But so many of us are.
Yeah.
And but we have to wear these masks in order to function in society. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And having good friends like Pastor Amado, and others that, help you along the journey. And there are times I've felt despair. And there are times where I fall back into some despair and disillusionment, disappointment. But my recovery is much faster than it used to be. And I know how to navigate it better than I used to. But it's taken time and intentionality. Now, this is a precarious situation because the two of them, you'll find out if we were to continue, they reverse the roles, and she talks about his explosive anger, breaking things, throwing things, and he's re-traumatizing her. And she loves him, but she says, I can't keep doing this. And so in his situation, he's going to have daily choices. Am I going to continue on the path of growth and make the steps? And one thing I want to say is when we're in these patterns, what may seem like a small change in somebody may have taken a lot of energy from them. Like from my wife, I had to instead of too much too late, I had to intentionally say, she's making a step here. It's not all that I wanted, but it may have taken her more energy than I realize, more effort. Now, there are times when you get in these situations and people will say what they think the therapist wants them to say, but they're not going to change. I heard a laugh. They had put on a good appearance to everybody, but behind scenes, they're not that nice. And people are surprised. They couldn't imagine. And so while we need to be patient with each other, because growth, some can happen fast, some happen slow, there is some risk that the person is going to go through the motions to keep you there, but they're really not going to change. They're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over. And, I think over time, with good counselors, most of us are not trained in good counseling because we just haven't had that exposure. But some people have insight, and then, of course, those who are trained can kind of help you see, is this person just playing you, saying what, or keeping up appearance, keeping up image, or are they really committed to some growth and steps? And I'm speaking especially from the controller, dynamic there. We all, until heaven, I'm not going to be the perfect husband, but I can become the best version of me in this life with the help of God and others and resources. And so growth can happen in small steps, but you got to be willing to take those small steps, and sometimes you got to take big steps. Thank you for the questions and so forth. Anybody else?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Because I know there's another part to this.
Yes.
But while I'm watching him,
Mm-hmm.
he seems, I guess it's like a medical term, he seems like the docile one.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're telling me that when it's reversed,
He's actually the controller.
yes. So that is why looking at just that part,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, leaves us with a really incorrect image of him, because I'm watching him, I'm like, oh my God, get a spine. But I realized that he's just maybe acting like I'm this way because you're not home. And the person with the issue is not her career,
Mm-hmm.
it's him.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how I'm looking at it, having known that now we're just saying is that he has an anger problem.
Right, but he's not always angry. And so we can be more than one thing, at different times. I imagine as a Christian, that is in recovery, that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, just assumption that he wants to be more than what he is, and that he's got good qualities. But because of his trauma, his capacity for dealing with distress is very low, and he's going to get triggered fast and furious, and it's something that he didn't choose for himself, but it's something that he can choose to seek help for. And so, you know, when we talk about in Vacillator, the all good and all bad split, you know, we can look at someone and say, man, this guy's pure evil, or she's the bad one. Well, the reality is they both have issues that trigger each other. And in some circumstances, he might be very generous and very caring and nurturing, but he can also be very volatile. And so, you know, living with someone like that, you know, and then being that, you know, that's going to be a difficult thing to navigate. And
Probably wonder if a controller would probably not go to something like this. I mean, an extreme case of a controller, because they know it will be a vulnerable moment. So he may not be, you know, on the extreme part, you know, on the pendulum.
well, many times people find new motivation when they realize they're going to lose their whole family.
And that
I can't tell you the number of men over the years that have had a change of mind when they realize they've lost their spouse and their kids and so forth. And sometimes they can recover that, sometimes they can't, but it puts them on a trajectory for growth that they wouldn't have chosen, and they become a better person, closer to God, and hopefully they can make up for some of that stuff from the past with their, you know, their family. Any other comments, questions? I'm going to jump into combinations then. So we talked a little bit about, and I wish I had this on able to put up on screen, but I don't. When a vacillator and voider gets together, you know, there's this idealizing, there's this harmony that exists, the vacillators having their needs met, unmet needs met, the avoiders having their unmet needs met, and so forth. But then over time, that high, you know, diminishes, life sets in, kids, and so forth, and the vacillator becomes disappointed with the avoider, and the avoider becomes frustrated by the neediness of the vacillator. And so the avoider will tend to withdraw, minimize, defend, believes that the vacillator is too emotional, and has a hard time having empathy for the vacillator's disappointment, frustration, and pain. As a result, the vacillator feels dismissed, invisible, misunderstood, then becomes angry, triggers with the reaction of motion, and the avoider becomes overwhelmed and tends to either fight back or withdraw, which then triggers the vacillator, intensifies their feelings. They feel devalued and develop contempt for their spouse, which then can trigger the avoider even more. They shut down and retreat, get busy with tasks and projects, and eventually things will get worked out, but there's really not a resolution. Sometimes the vacillator explodes, they feel okay, and then the avoider is like, okay, well, at least things are calm and so forth. And so that's a common dynamic. It doesn't mean it happens every day all the time, but it happens, and I've got a whole bunch of sheets that go into the details of that we wouldn't have time, but if I'm working with someone, you know, in coaching, we would go through that. You have the vacillator controller combination like these two, and sparks can fly because tension builds up, the vacillator becomes disappointed and preoccupied, wants more, feels abandoned, pursues to address the problems with complaints rather than request. That's a common thing about vacillator. They'll complain rather than ask because it feels they feel like they shouldn't have to ask. And The controller will get easily angered and start trying to control, use anger as a defense, become reactive, and they don't have empathy for the self and the others. The vacillator will vent and protest, and then the controller, uses intimidation to gain control. Well, the vacillator is going to match that anger, and sparks can fly. And then the tension dies down, but there's no resolution. There's calm, enjoyment until the next cycle of frustration, of disappointment. What happens when two avoiders come together? An avoider plus an avoider is 0? Is that what it is? When you have two avoiders that come together, you have two very self-sufficient, self-reliant individuals who have, they want a relationship, but both of them tend to be either career-focused or focused on tasks and projects. That's the avoider way of finding meaning and affirmation. That's how they got it growing up. And you could see it in baseball, sports. You could see it in business, different aspects. I'm sure you could see it in church life where someone just, an autopilot, that's how life works. And that's where you get satisfaction and so forth. And so there's not a lot of connection there, but there is connection. Minimal affection. Problems are minimized, avoided, emotions avoided. Both are independent, fine. And then a crisis comes. A child has cancer, or one of the partners gets cancer, or a miscarriage, in our case. And that crisis tends to break through one of the avoiders and basically tells them, you can't avoid this. And so they end up getting more in touch with emotions and pain and so forth. But then they feel neglected by their partner who can't enter that pain with them and can't go and experience that with them, and that can create a problem and can be a lifelong problem, or they can end up just parting ways. But usually a crisis interferes with the steadiness, the lack of range of emotions when one of them goes through a crisis and needs the other one to be there for him, but that other one really doesn't know how to be there for him. And as it says here, the system breaks down. And so there's conflict over the crisis with no empathy or stress management skills. And again, there's several pages that go with that combination. Vacillator-pleaser combination. Don't you think that would be a great one, where you got a pleasing person always trying to make the vacillator happy? Isn't that what the vacillator wants? No, it's not. The vacillator wants connection. The pleaser doesn't necessarily want connection. They want happiness. They want peace. They want ease of anxiety. And so the vacillator knows that the pleaser is being phony, is not being authentic and genuine. And as a vacillator myself, if people compliment me, and sometimes I wonder, are they just being nice or do they really mean it? Now, if they really mean it, that means a lot to me. If they're just being polite, that doesn't mean a lot to me. It doesn't feed my need. And so vacillators will detect the superficiality of the pleaser's engagement, and I'm talking in general terms here. And so, vacillator will sooner or later get a dark mood, will be frustrated, disappointed. That'll trigger the pleaser, who will panic and try to put a positive spin on the vacillator's complaints, will try to be nice enough, which will again trigger the vacillator because they want truth, not lies, escalates their anger. So the pleaser becomes anxious about that and scurries to try to appease, but avoid the problem, which again triggers the vacillator and intensifies. And the pleaser ends up feeling like, I can't do anything right for this person. I can't make them happy. And they can try to please to prevent another outburst, or eventually they might just give up and part ways. So that's a common combination. Avoider pleaser, that's myelin and K. That's K there. Myelin is off there. The two therapists. The pleaser is always reading the temperature of the avoider. They want to make sure the avoider's happy. The avoider doesn't need much. And so they begin to get annoyed with the pleaser. Stop taking my temperature all the time. Stop asking me if everything's okay. Stop, just leave me alone. And then that triggers the pleaser because they're feeling rejected. And so then they try harder. And so you have this cycle of frustration, which again, you have breakthroughs and so forth from time to time. But the avoider will disrespect the pleaser. And wants the pleaser to grow up and be independent like the avoider. And so that controller victim, you have this circle where domination, but then sometimes the victim gains some power. The controller goes too far and feels like they're going to lose the victim. The victim all of a sudden has some power, and the avoider or the controller will comply for a while, but then it gets flipped back into the same dynamic of domination and control. Pleaser. What could go wrong with two people trying to make each other happy all the time? They say on here, where do you want to go to eat? Oh, I don't know. Where do you want to go to eat? Where do you want to go to eat? And so you have this, let's see. We don't have problems, right? Right. They collude to ignore the reality of the pain and problems because neither of them can be really honest with the other because they're trying to avoid conflict and reassure rather than listening. Oh, it'll be okay, and so forth. Giving and performing, they'll rescue others, say yes to requests and being overcommitted. And then the system breaks down when stress or difficulties can no longer be ignored or minimized. One spouse may start to feel, confront, or try to face reality, and the other will resist by trying to stay in the pleaser role. Kind of like the avoider, pleaser. One ends up having a crisis or something and has to be more real, more honest, and so forth. And I think we've covered most of them. We're given just a thumbnail sketch of things here, but my hope for this is not that, some people are going to leave here wanting more. More from their partner, more from life, more from friends or whatever. This information is not to be used to change another person. We can hope the other person would change, but really what we want to do is focus on growing us and our own reaction, our own contribution. Because if you have a cycle, if you have a system, and one person starts making changes, it's going to change the system. When I stop being so reactive and angry at my wife, it changed her response to me. The dynamic shifted. And of course, it would be nice if in a relationship, two partners were become an expert in their own attachment style, but then also become aware of the other person's attachment style and what things are helpful and what things are not. always accommodating and pleasing a vacillator is not necessarily going to be a helpful thing. And then we talked about there's overlap between each of these. The pleaser and avoider have some overlap, but they're not the same. The vacillator, avoider have some overlap, but they're not the same. The vacillator, pleaser have some overlap, but they're not the same. And so they're, you could say, well, I have a pleaser in this, and you may react differently in different situations, but there also can be overlap because all of us at some points in life want to please people. But we may not have all of the conditions. Now, they do say for those who come out of the chaotic home that sometimes they'll score all of them almost equally. And the reason for that is they will try each one to see how, sometimes some will try each different approach to see which is going to work, which is going to help them in a situation. And or occasionally you might find yourself reacting more as a vacillator in this situation, but more of a pleaser in that. And so they say, focus on your most significant relationships and how you respond and choose that one. I'm very much a vacillator. I have pleasing tendencies. I can have some avoidant tendencies, others, but, vacillator is pretty core to me. And so, that's the one I've focused to become aware of and work to grow in. So for those who want to continue in the growth, I recommend getting the How We Love book and reading it. Some of us are quick learners, some are slower like me, and it takes time for things to sink in and need to go over it over again and again. There's a workbook that you can buy separately that goes with the book. To answer some questions. I wish they would break that book down into smaller segments, like for vacillators, for controllers, for whatever, but it's all in one book.
I found this, I think if you know kind of what your style might be, it helps you to go there. It's a lot of reading. And I think now they have the videos, and I think the videos, if you're a visual person, you will probably connect with that quicker, but it's good. You want more detail.
There's stuff I learned from the book, but there's other stuff I learned from the videos. And you don't have to be a part of an online group to do the videos. They have a package where you can do it on your own, and you're not going to get, the interaction with others, but that option is available at their website. There's a small group online program. You can look on their website and see if they have someone in your area that provides some counseling or coaching in this area. And then this is something I do as a ministry on the side, but I'm not a therapist. I don't, I've got some good clinical skills, but I'm not, I don't have the clinical skills of a psychotherapist that can go with you. Now, a lot of therapists don't do a lot with attachment, so you can't just assume the therapist understands attachment. But my experience is often in a couple situation, one person's really on board, the other person's not on board. And so there are some stuff that you're going to have to go it alone and do, and hopefully the other person can come on board when they're ready. But you don't have to depend upon all of your growth based on another person. And sometimes good friends can be that other person in the extended listening and so forth. Yes?
Okay, I consider myself pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And right, Carol? She said she doesn't. And if I decide to, all right, stop pleasing her as much as I do, then she's going to think that there's something wrong. You used to do this and now you stop.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get together and say, okay, this is my issue, I don't want to please you that much? How will she take that? What will happen with us if, that we try to change that situation?
Well, the biggest challenge with the pleaser is they're trying to please everybody. And sometimes they neglect their primary relationships at home. Now, I'm not saying that's the case for you, I'm just saying that's a trend. And so, there's that part of it of restraining, when the nominating committee calls, sorry, Pastor Amado, but I know he has a balanced view, of saying, I could do this, but I can't do that, and that, or I could do this and that, but I can't, whatever. Putting some own restraint on yourself when someone asks you to do something. Start practicing saying, hey, can I get back to you? As a vacillator even, I used to get great rewards if people asked me to do things, internal rewards. If they asked me to do things, it'd make me feel good. It would boost my sense of being needed and liked and appreciated. But that may not necessarily be the best thing for my children, for my wife, for my time with God, and whatever. So there's that component of it. But then in the extended listening, there would be a journey. But really, the book is going to have recommendations for the pleaser, and it has recommendations for those who are married to the pleaser. And I think the book is going to give you a better answer than I can off the fly. I mean, I know the avoidant vacillator real well, and because I've lived it. Some of the others I know, I've talked with people, but I want to be a little reserved in how much advice I give, based on that. Anyone else? Are we ready to call it a day? Okay, my wife has a couple of gifts, and so we'll have her do that. And then we have our sign-up sheet somewhere. Pastor Amado had like 3 of them, and we don't know where some of them went. We went here. We got one here. There may be some others. And so we'll just put that on the back table. I'll put it up right now while you're doing that. This is, let me turn this off.
So the sign up, Brian, the sign up sheet would be for those who may be interested in continuing with the family life directors here locally. And I think Brian would help maybe coach to continue a small group if those of you who are interested. That's the idea.
So if there's, I know I'm not using a microphone, I know that there are folks watching as well. And thank you. So in discussing about the sign-up sheet for folks who are interested in maybe connecting with Brian and Janice to further look into this this matter, that sign-up sheet over there, you can fill it. You have a pen. If you need one, let us know. We're going to ask, and maybe Family Life could be that local connection for us. Family Life could be that local connection. And if we have some folks, if there are folks who are watching online, we're so grateful you stayed with us, that you could actually send a message to me as the pastor right on the website, KissimmeeSDA.com. You can communicate to me you're interested in connecting with Pastor Burgess about all this. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, so who here has been married the longest? Let's see, 50 years. Really? Wow. Anyone want to challenge that? No. There you are. We just thank you for being here, and you have weathered many storms, I'm sure. And I did want to, we do have one last. Is there anyone here? I know there are a few who have attended all of the sessions starting Friday. We have 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. Do I go with the youngest?
Well, that would be me.
Someone said I'm the youngest. Pastor Amado?
Oh my,
You
gonna put
decide.
me in
The
that
youngest or
spot.
the oldest? Or the
Oh.
ones with a family, the largest? No, I'll let you.
My, oh my. That's a hard situation. So could I call a lifeline? No. I think what I want to do then is put a number down on a piece of paper that I'm thinking of.
Okay, and whoever gets.
And how many hands went up for this? 4 hands.
I'll make it easy. Which ones of you have suffered the most in your relationship? I'm kidding. I'm
There are
kidding.
more hands that now went up. Wait, was that a vacillator to vacillator response? I don't know. Okay, so let's do this. There is a piece of paper. I'm gonna write down, and I'm gonna write down my number. Don't say it out loud. Okay? It is, how many of those, the hands that went up first? 4. Good. Can you help me, Janice? Will you stand and just watch here? Okay. From 0 to 20, I have a number written down. Let's go with the first one. That hand, right? Purple? What number? What was that?
He said 8.
8. No.
16.
Who said 16? Thank you. No, the answer is no. Okay, sorry. Your hand was also up. 17. No. 7. No. No. There's more hands now. No. From 0, well, we already went through the numbers. And now there are more hands. You said 3?
All sessions. And you have to be here for all.
That means Friday night, this morning at 9:45, 11 a.m., and now the 2:30.
Correct.
I was late for the 2:30.
Oh, okay, well, so we have, they were here, and this gentleman was here. So we're down to our 3.
We're down, okay. So it's just 3, right? And by this time, you forgot what numbers went out there, didn't you?
Just put a number in the top line and fill it up.
All right, here it goes.
I said to make it easier, why don't you just give it to me because I was the one. You don't have to worry about it.
You were last night, weren't you? She was here, if you're going. I'm giving it to Shirley.
Wait, let's go back.
Wait, I just...
And you said number 7, and you said 8, and there, what do you have to say? 3. Okay. And are you all together? Oh, there, we take one vote. 7, 10, 8, and I don't know what she had originally said. Did you say a number? What was your number? 16. 16.
Oh, who's closest? Someone else had another number that I didn't hear. What number did you say? You're the winner. It is number 18. That is the closest. She was here last night. And yes, she was. Let's put our hands together.
Okay. I just want to be clear. The sign-up sheet, you're not committing to anything specific. It's just saying you're interested in learning about more things that are available. One thing that would be available is doing the online group. I did this once, and I'll probably do it again. I did a kind of a book reading group on acceptance and commitment therapy in 7 weeks. So it's a self-help book. This morning, during my message, I talked quite a bit about things that I drew upon from acceptance and commitment training or therapy that were helpful to me. So you're not committing to one thing. You're just saying, I'm open to other opportunities that are available in the future online. As far as like coaching, if you wanted some coaching, I would want you to go through the group process first, because there's a lot of just material there, and you're going to have to do your work, and I would come alongside you to help you along in that journey. So that's what the sign-up sheet is for. I've got 3 books on acceptance and commitment training, which is an evidence-based, they call it in the field of cognitive behavioral, where we relate to our emotions differently. We don't necessarily try to always fight them and change them, although there are benefits at times of that, but usually you're just following your values and going with what you choose rather than being stuck in patterns. And then also they have ways of reducing inner stress and so forth to help you to be able to make those choices. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Pastor Amado. And I pray that you'll pray for us as we pray for you. And, I do believe we're living in the time is wrapping up. But I also believe that God is going to be growing us and healing us and transforming us. And part of discipleship for me is not just memorizing all the Bible verses, but being able to live out God's calling in our lives and being able to overcome some of those things that interfere with it, as we've talked about, because our brokenness at times can hold us back, can sabotage us, can cause us to sin against others. But if we can work on some healing and growth, we can become more of what God intends for us. Amen? Let's pray together. Father, I thank you for Pastor Amado and Jane and their church here, and for the Family Life Ministry and other ministries, their church school, and for each individual here. And I ask your blessing to be upon them, and thank you for the good things that you have done in their lives individually and collectively, and the things that you want to do. And Lord, I recognize that in any church there are some that are really, really struggling. And I pray that that some clarity can come to their mind as to the path, the journey, the choices that need to be made. Sometimes they're hard choices. Other times they're easier choices. Sometimes they're simple things, but we're resistant to them. We look to you as our guide, as our healer, and we thank you for the spiritual gifts that you give counselors and others to minister and be of help. And we pray for them as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you all. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you again, Brian, Janice. Thank you so much. Well, we've come to the close. I want to thank you for your staying and being a part of this. I pray you've all been blessed, enriched, informed, and by the grace of God, we're being transformed and renewed. Thank you for the gifts, the many beautiful gifts that have been also granted in these bags. I do want to ask, and just throw it out there, if you had an opportunity to give any way to contribute to just offset some costs, we thank you already. If you would like to, just let me know. But we're going to keep them in our prayers. They're going to be heading back to their family and back to their home life and work as well. So we're going to remember the Burgesses because we're grateful that they've enhanced our experience. Have a great rest of the afternoon and a blessed new week as we're experiencing still Sabbath, but we're about to launch into a new week in the Lord. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.